Hello, today I'm going to talk about the James Comey book, which I have just finished reading. You'll have no doubt heard a lot about it, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and do something which is a bit different, because when I reviewed Fire and Fury, by the time I'd read the book, everything interesting in it had already been said on the television. In this case, it's completely different. In my opinion, the most interesting things within this book have not yet been said, or maybe they have and I haven't heard them. So let's go. The first thing I've got to say about this book is that it shows a lot of what I think is guilt. Now, this of course could be because of my background. I am largely a historian dealing things related to the Second World War, and in particular Holocaust, and there is something called survivor guilt. And obviously in James Comey's case, no one's been killed. It's not a comparable case, but I've even seen things in other cases related to Second World War or other conflicts where people did have what is usually called survivor guilt. They feel as though the things they should have done, and in a way they feel sorry that they got out of it unscathed. Of course, in this case, James Comey didn't exactly get out of it unscathed because he lost his job. One thing that's been written a lot about is that he's sort of lowering himself to the level of Trump, and he's sort of name-calling and all the rest of it. That's not something I actually feel. Now, what I'm going to do in this review, so you can decide if you want to actually continue watching this or not, is the following. I'm not going to refer to anything that happened after the election of November 2016. What I'm going to talk about is what happened before the election. There's plenty of other people, sorry, I don't understand, plenty of other reviewers doing that, but there's plenty of information on after 2016. So as far as that's concerned, I'm not going to talk about it too much. But everything I think within the book itself is leading up to that moment. Now, let's talk about some of the really interesting things which I learned from it. Now, one thing is he talks about his work against the Mafia, and in particular there's one character called Sammy Gravano, Sammy the Bull Gravano from the Gambino crime family. Now, I've actually prepared a video which I'll be doing sometime in the future on him. I've actually written quite a lot of material, and this book actually filled in some of the gaps and things which I'd failed to understand. So from that point of view, I found that very interesting. He also talks of the work on organized crime. One thing he brings out, for example, he says that they thought, now this is the 1990s, he said that what we ought to be doing is looking at the weddings and the funerals of the Mafia. Now, having seen The Godfather, which was made in 1970, and referring to an incident which allegedly, or in the fictitious book, took place in 1946, where you see the wedding, the very start of the film, and what happens is that the elder son goes out, Sonny, and he smashes the cameras belonging to the FBI. Well, according to James Comey, they weren't doing that type of thing. Another thing he talks about is the conflicts which he has, for example, with one American TV star who sold shares in an insider dealing thing. What happened was the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company realized that his one of his products would be withdrawn, so he sold his shares, but the stock broker then informed the TV personality, and she sold her shares as well, and he had to decide whether or not to prosecute on the basis of this information. Clearly it's insider trading, but what did he have to do about it? The TV star's Martha Stewart, and he himself says that he used one of her menus as in his own kitchen. This is a book about leadership as he sees it. Now, obviously, we're building up the fact that, in his opinion, Trump doesn't show leadership, and he comments on his work. First of all, when he was a school kid and he was working for a shop, and the shop owner wanted to make the shop the best shop in the entire chain, and so he showed a great deal of pride in it. And he refers to this gentleman who was the manager of the shop as one of the best leaders he ever had. And considering some of his leaders included later 3 presidents of the United States, and such people as Rudy Giuliani and others, and Robert Mueller, of course. He refers to how he tried to show leadership when he was within the FBI. For example, one of the things that Robert Mueller was noted for was his white shirt. I mean, you often hear that said on the television these days. And so he started deliberately wearing other colours to show himself to be a little less formal. He says that, for example, when he went down to the canteen to get something to eat, he always asked his bodyguards who had to be close to him, but he asked them to show a bit of a distance so that other people could come up to him if necessary and talk to him. He wanted to create an atmosphere where people would talk to each other and where hierarchical barriers were brought down. He refers to this as well within the presidencies, comparing the presidency of Bush the younger as being one where people had to have a shirt and tie, look very formal, to that of Barack Obama, who didn't stand on formality. He admits, for example, that he never understood how the place settings were set at the meals where the president was. Now, one thing about this book is, as I mentioned earlier, that a lot of people seem to say, okay, he's just getting back at Trump, and it certainly is leading up to that. I mean, that's pretty clear from the way he talks about the way he his interactions with others, and that Trump isn't exactly a leader. And he comes, to return to my point at the very beginning, is that of the guilt. Now, he explains exactly and in some detail how the investigation into the missing emails on Hillary Clinton's server actually happened, and what is clear that Hillary must be pretty naive as far as security is concerned on computers. Now, and I would imagine that just about everybody who's watching this is aware of the security which Hillary wasn't aware of. But the question is, and this is the thing, did she do it deliberately, or was there any question of crime involved, or was it just that she was totally naive and didn't realize what she was doing? Now, but his problem is the fact that when the disgraced congressman Weiner had Hillary's emails on his computer, and then they decided to open the investigation, his problem was the following: does he announce that he's going to reopen the investigation or not, given that the election was just a few days away? Now, what he does is that obviously he does open the investigation again, and I think this is where his guilt complex above all comes from. The same guilt as incidentally he's expressed for other things which happened in his life. The opening of the book, where there's an armed burglar in his parents' home, or to another incident where he was part of a group which bullied someone else, although having been the victim of bullying himself. The guilt and the desire to do better. The guilt also of the FBI, who did things to attack the civil rights movement, including the attacks on Dr. King in the 1960s, and his efforts to make up for that. And we get that in his conversations with Barack Obama, and the way he looks up to Barack Obama, and he expresses how much he's learned from the then president, and also not only that, but in the style of leadership, how Barack Obama would listen to anybody irrespective of how they are dressed and where they come from, as long as they know what they are talking about. For me, the book was a surprise. I wasn't expecting it to be like that, and I found it particularly interesting. I mean, from looking at leadership, management issues, I think this is something which in the future could be studied for those things alone. For me, from the historical point of view, as I mentioned earlier, the Mafia investigations I found particularly interesting. Also his comments on Rudy Giuliani when he was doing it, and the fear was Rudy Giuliani doing this as a result of doing what he did to further his own political career later, or was he doing it for other reasons? Right, so anyway, if you get a copy, give it a go. I think it's a very interesting book. Certainly it will make him a multi-millionaire, as Michael Wolff's book on Fire and Fury will make him a multi-millionaire. Another book I've actually got, and I've had it now for it came out a couple of months ago or so, is the one on the Russian connection, and I still haven't read it, and I don't think that one somehow is going to do as well as these two books, but all the same, I think the authors of that book as well will also become millionaires out of it. What I've just said now is irrespective, and what I'm curious now, if you've got this far. Obviously, I'm British, so I didn't have any vote in the American election. But if you voted for Trump and you were undecided, could you write down if the decision of James Comey to restart the Hillary Clinton investigation was a factor in you voting the way you voted? That would be very curious for me to know from a historical point of view, and or if you did vote for Trump, that made no difference whatsoever. But if you did that, please write it down, because the only way we're going to know it is not from the opinion of people who didn't vote for Trump or had no intention of voting him, but for those that actually did vote for him. Were those factors of importance? Please put your comments below. I've tried to keep this relatively short, and I've tried to keep it relatively relevant. For the incidents after the election of 2016, please read the book. I know that's what you wanted to hear, but I'm trying to be original and give you something different.